This is the Adopted Mom Podcast. Adoption may look different for each family, but we need solidarity from other crazy people who took this leap. And that is what we do here. We encourage, we build up, we share the wins and losses. We lean on each other, and we get through this together. Thanks for joining us. Good morning. Well, it's morning for me right now. It may be afternoon or the middle of the night for you. So good whatever time of day it is. My name is Alex Fitton, and this is the Adoptive Mom, introducing you to Jeanette Tapley, who hosts the podcast, It's Time for Coffee. It's so good, you guys. Go subscribe like right now. Jeanette is our people, y'all. She's hilarious, wise, she loves Jesus, she's just as obsessed with pop culture as I am, and you guessed it, she's an adoptive mom. Jeanette and her husband, Jesse, have 2 bio boys, and they adopted their daughter, Zoe, internationally a few years ago. Before we jump into her episode, I want to share some exciting things with y'all. You know how I've been talking about joining my email team and how awesome it is? So, to celebrate National Adoption Month, I'm sending an AMP sticker to every single new subscriber for the whole month. That's right. So when you sign up, you get the weekly episode right in your inbox, plus special notes and links and discount codes from me just for Team AMP. You don't want to miss out, so head to theadoptivemompodcast.com/email and sign up to receive your free sticker. And me. I mean, those two things go hand in hand. Also, I am getting everything together to officially launch the AMP community page on Facebook. This will be a special group for listeners and guests to connect. I will be doing exclusive live interviews and updates in there, so you don't want to miss out, and I'll share more later when it's all ready to go. Okay, I think that's it. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my good friend, Jeanette Tapley. All right, guys, like I said a second ago, let's all welcome Jeanette Tapley. I am so excited, Jeanette, to have you on because you're another podcaster, and that makes me really happy to talk to someone else who does this. So, hi, how's it going?
Hey, it's so good. I'm so happy to hang out with you.
It's so much fun. And I know who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself and your family to the listeners?
So I would say, hey, friends, I'm Jeanette, and I am the wife to Jesse. We've been married for almost 14 years, and I'm the mother. I am not the wife to my children.
You got some sister wife thing going on down there.
They think I'm their wife because they boss me around. I am the mom to Ezekiel, Titus, and Zoe. Zeke is 12, Titus is 10, and Zoe is 8. So we are just in that kind of fun stage where our kids are a little bit bigger, and they're like real people now. So that's fun.
We were talking about this before we started recording about how she can just listen, you guys, this is going to blow your minds. If she needs to go to the store or something, she can just go to the store.
Yeah. I don't take them with me. It's amazing.
I don't I'm not comprehending. There's a disconnect.
It's a magical time. I went and picked up dinner for them today. I'm like, yeah, I'll be right back. So I went and picked up food, and I came back and fed them. So
nobody had any demands about what you listen to on the radio, or because one kid was spitting at another kid, or that didn't happen? It just didn't happen.
It didn't. I listened to a podcast, and it was magical.
Seriously hating you right now. I'm kidding.
And like you said, I am a podcast host. I host a podcast called It's Time for Coffee, where we sit and talk with other friends about life and their stories, and just kind of make and meet new friends all over the world.
Yes, it's so fun, you guys. Her podcast is awesome. I listened to it after I saw a friend of mine who was a guest on her podcast that posted a picture of herself recording, and I was like, okay, I've got to figure out who this girl is. And then I looked at your Instagram, and you were an adoptive mom, and I was like, oh my gosh, what has happened? How am I not friends with her? And then we became friends the next day.
We did. We hit it right off, and I love that. I think that's just the beauty of the internet right now. There are some shady parts, but I hope that sounded shady. There are some shady.
Jeanette has braces, so
and they're fairly new, so it might sound like I'm swearing, but I swear I'm not.
You know what? That's allowed on this podcast. It's fine.
Okay. So there are some shady parts of the internet, but there's also just like the connections that happened so fluidly where like you and I text and Marco Polo like every single day now. And Jesse's like, oh, Alex again. I'm like, yeah, it's Alex.
I love it. I know Brian's the same. Like we're household names to each other, and we've never met. It's kind of fun, and we have like some really fun stuff coming up that we're collaborating on. But before we talk about that stuff, you said earlier, you have 3 kids, and one of them does not look like the others. So tell us about that.
Right. So Zoe, our little girl, is adopted from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as a lot of adoptive moms or parents know, that was a really hard adoption. We started the process basically the same month the Congo shut down. So it was Jesse can tell you the exact like days, but it was like 3 years in process with her, which in the grand scheme of adoption isn't too terribly long. But she in August is or will be her 3-year home date. So we'll have a big party for her, which mostly means we'll say, where do you want to eat dinner? And she'll pick Panda Express and we'll go celebrate her. So one other thing about Zoe is she is deaf. So as a family, we use ASL to communicate with her. And one of our biggest questions we ask all the time is if we knew she was deaf going into her adoption process. And our answer is yes. It's actually the main reason we chose her. So on those days where adoption is really hard and her deafness takes a toll on me, I have to remember that like I willingly chose her because of it. And that's kind of a slap in the face sometimes when it's the thing I hate the most. I'm like, this is why I chose you.
Yeah. And I love that. And it's so much fun because like she said, their whole family does ASL. And so one of my favorite things is asking Jeanette how to say random things in ASL. And it's so fun.
Well, it started because it was such a funny thing because we were Marco Poloing. I guess it's a verb now.
It's a word now.
And I said Zoe wanted a Whataburger, so she told me she wanted a Whataburger, so I have to go to Whataburger now. And you're like, hold on, how did she say Whataburger? So I had to show you how we signed Whataburger. I'm like, it's better than Panda Express. Zoe loves Panda Express. So gross.
I love Panda Express too. I know. That honey walnut chicken though, my gosh.
We don't have that one.
What?
We only have like orange chicken and a couple other ones. Like there's not very good options.
Maybe that's why. Maybe it's I don't know. I mean, our Panda Express is still not. It's still fast food, but whatever. Okay, so I want to hear all about your adoption story. You said it was hard, and it's interesting to note you guys were like babies when you even started having kids, right?
Yes, we were very young.
And so when you started this process, how old were you when you just like were like, hey, I think we might want to adopt? What did that whole thing look like?
That's really funny because we were 27. I was 27, so Jesse was 29. And so we were like, we're called to adopt. Let's do this. And we knew we wanted Africa. And so we just kind of like started looking at all of the countries in Africa's requirements. And I was on the phone with this agency, and they're like, okay, well, so they gave me all their information, and she was like, okay, well, tell me about you and your husband. And I was like, okay, we met the criteria of being married long enough because we got married at 18 and 20, so we got married super young, so young. So we met that easily, and she's like, okay, well, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 27, my husband's 29, and she's like, I'm so sorry, in this country, I think it was Burundi, you had to be 30 to adopt from there. And so I'm like, you're telling me I'm not old enough to adopt? I have 2 kids. How am I not old enough? And so then that really was like the awakening of like having to go through each country to see what their requirements were. And that really took out for us real quick. Like even Haiti, we couldn't adopt from Haiti because we weren't old enough.
Goodness, dude. I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of countries you have to be 30. Some say 25, some say 30, but you have to be married for at least 10 years.
Well, you fit that one, so.
Yeah, we got that one. We nailed that. So biggest concern when we started adopting was that it was going to take too long. Our boys are 2 years apart, and I didn't want there to be this massive gap between our son Titus and our next child. And so I felt like we needed to do everything as fast as we could. So we like jumped on it. Like, we're called to adopt in January. In April, we had our home study done. And actually, that next July, even, we started doing all the dossier paperwork for the Congo. So it was just kind of like, once we realized Congo was going to be our country, we talked to a couple other families who had adopted from there. And then we just kind of dove in head first. We had to pick an agency. And that was kind of tricky because the Congo was getting a little sticky. But our agency like opened armed because they make money. They're like, yeah, we want you. And so we, the crazy thing is we like jumped in, had a home study, had everything done. And they assigned us with a child immediately. And we're like, yes, this is awesome. Like, the Lord's just like knocking down doors for us. And 6 weeks like maybe a month later, we got a picture of our daughter who's going to be our daughter, and it would look like a totally different child. It was a different child. Like, I almost can promise you they had swapped our child. And I was like, oh, okay. But there's still that elatement of like, okay, this is my kid. Like, this is what I'm doing. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, oh, sorry. Something happened. Her family came back for her. You lost a referral. And I was like, oh. So that whole thing seems really fishy to me. Yeah. And now, like 5 or 6 years removed, I can be like, something was up. Especially as we've heard more stories come out of, what is it, like incorrect stuff that happened in Congo.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer. It's such a bummer when money gets involved with countries who have so little, how much corruption really can happen.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the devastating things that we've had to kind of address within our community, our adoption community. So that landed us in, like, I'm not going to give you the month by month, but it's important right here. That landed us in August. In September, Congo shut down completely. They said, we're not allowing kids out right now. We're revamping the whole adoption process. We'll talk to you guys soon. I was like, high five, we'll talk to you guys soon. But like, our adoption agency is still processing adoptions. So it's like, they're still handing out referrals. They're still doing the work they need to do, even with their lawyers. Like, everything is still processing. The government shut down though. And so it was super weird. So, but like, it had happened a few months before that where it took like a week and they're like, okay, we're back open. So it was a really weird situation. We just had faith that they would open back up.
Yeah.
And then, so I emailed our agency every week. Do you have a referral for us? Do you have a referral for us? Like, then it's turned into every 2 weeks and then once a month. And during one of those monthly emails, I said, hey, what's the deaf situation like there? Is there like a deaf orphanage, or is there, is that in need? Because in Uganda, there's like a really big deaf orphanage. Mm-hmm. And so we had known of that, but we're like, maybe there's no deaf people in Congo. We don't know. And the reason we asked was Jesse was raised around deaf people like his whole life. So he knew deaf people a lot. He had a deaf friend in high school. He had a deaf girlfriend in college. My biological dad, he was an interpreter. And so like, and then my cousin actually is an interpreter as well. And so this heart and passion for the deaf community was always in our hearts. And my mom even, I was pregnant with one of the boys, and she said, wouldn't it just be so interesting if God gave you a deaf child? And I'm like, first of all, I'm pregnant. Like, don't say these things to
yeah,
me.
exactly.
I'm like 12 years old and pregnant, and you're like scaring me. And I'm like, we would be totally fine if that happened. And I told her, I was kind of being snarky with her, but I was like, if he did, we would move to California, because in our community where we lived in Alaska, there was nothing for deaf people. So I was like, we would move. Like, how you like that? So I emailed her that question, and she was like, let me check into it. Okay. And so then, like, however much longer later, she referred us this sweet little girl named Naomi, gave us Naomi. We signed on the dotted line, was totally happy. The next day, they put it out in our Facebook group. Who was the family that wanted the deaf child? And I'm like, well, now we're adopting 2 little girls from the Congo. And Jesse's like, no, we're not, because that is not in our budget.
Like, no, we're not.
So then we were really led with this situation of, how do you pick between two little girls who need somebody? And she said, get back to me. Like, okay, just get back to me. So we sat down over breakfast one morning, took the kids to school, and went to this cute little restaurant we have. Sat down, and we both just kind of looked at each other like, we know the answer. Like, what would you do? What would you do? Just kind of like, could we do this? Could we take on a deaf child? And that's why I say, like, we chose her because of her deafness. Our agency told us in a really kind but honest way, like, we know that if you say no to Naomi, this little girl, her name was Rosette, this little deaf girl, Rosette, we don't know that we can find somebody else for her. And so that could have been guilting, but at the same time, like, it was very honest.
Yeah.
And so we could just kind of sit back and we were like, okay, well, what do we do? And Jesse's like, I say we go for it. And I was like, I knew you were going to say that. And so I knew it too, like, deep in our hearts. Like, it was the obvious step for us. And so Rosette, who is now Zoe, was in an orphanage for about 18 months before she came home to us 3 years ago.
Wow.
Crazy. So along that process, like, all of our papers processed really quickly. Everything, like, went really, really fast because her case was just pretty easy, I think. But then we had to wait for the Congo to allow kids out, which was really hard.
I was about to ask, so after you guys made that decision at the coffee shop, how long was it from then until she came home?
It was, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. At least, it was like 19, 20 months.
Good.
19,
grief.
20 months, yeah.
I'm not a patient person. I wouldn't.
No. It was really hard. And it was like, we had 2 Christmases without her, maybe. Yeah, we had to have 2 Christmas. Anyways, we sent Christmas presents to the orphanage, and we Skyped her a couple of times. She was legally ours 4 months later. So all of that time, it was like our daughter, our daughter was so far away from us, and we could do nothing about it. So Jesse went over one time and stayed with her. He moved her from the orphanage to a foster home, which was time for that to happen. But which that story in and of itself is crazy, because he meets these 2 amazing African women. One is our lawyer, one is her orphanage mama, who has cared for this little girl for us for 18 months. And they hand this little girl, over to this giant white man. and then they leave him with her. And he was like, am I allowed to give her a bath? Like, she needs a bath. Is that okay to do? And I'm like, well, you're her dad. Yeah. And he's like, this is so weird. Like, it's so hard. But she went into his arms. Like, she accepted in that moment, like, okay, like, here we go. Here's our next journey. And so then from that point, when he had her in May, it was just 3 months until she came home.
And did you both go to get her, or just one of you?
No, just Jesse. He did all of the flying. I didn't have all the vaccinations, and I don't think he trusted me to fly out of country. So he did all the heavy lifting on that.
Oh gosh, that's hilarious. But so now you have a daughter, and that's so fun because before you were a #boy mom.
Yeah. Rowdy boys, little girl.
Yeah. And from what I hear, she's pretty girly, right? Like, she's kind of a diva.
Oh gosh, she is the most diva. She's really cool in the sense of, like, she's the daughter I want to raise. Her and her best friend I have this picture of them, and it needs to be blown up and framed. They are full gowns, like princess gowns, makeup, everything, standing hands on the hip, watching their daddies skin a deer. I'm like, yes, don't be afraid of anything messy. And then they're like, now we're going to the ball. Bye. Like, oh my gosh. So she really is the girliest thing. I have to hide her makeup from her because she'll make a mess. And she puts on way too much. Jessie gets so frustrated. But yeah, she's so girly. She'll go out and paint her nails, like every day if I let her. Like she's just. We haven't really dealt with like what colors look good together. We're working on that. So she doesn't have the greatest fashion sense.
Mm-hmm.
But when she was in Africa, this is one of my favorite stories. When she was in Africa, we were Skyping, and one of the men said, we asked her what can we get her for Christmas, and they said she wants to be something fashion, and I'm like, oh, clay. She wants to fashion something. No. Like a Barbie, like fashion. I'm like, oh, send a Barbie with clothes. And they're like, no, she wants to be a fashion girl, a model. I'm like, this girl's been in an orphanage for 18 months, and she wants to be a fashion girl? What do y'all watch? Do you have TV? Like, what's happening? And so she is our little fashion girl.
Does she, in fact, want to be a model?
She does. Every once in a while. Well, right now she tells me that she wants to go to college. I'm going to college, and I'm not getting married like you. I'm like, oh, hey, thanks. Thanks for shaming me, daughter. I'm like,
I like to imagine you two having like silent fights with each other.
Oh, yeah. So we have some friends at church, and they like, Zoe's getting in trouble in the parking lot. So I'm like signing frantically. My face is very obvious that I'm frustrated, and she's like sad and kind of like whatever. And they're like, look, children, Zoe's getting in trouble. Like, oh, geez. Like, yeah, it's true.
Oh,
so
that's
yeah,
hilarious.
it's very she's a really great deaf person because she is so dramatic. She is so flamboyant with her like hands and her face, and her storytelling is really, really fun to watch. But with that deaf person personality, if she doesn't want to talk to you, she'll straight up not look at you or close her eyes.
I never even thought about that. Ignoring on a whole new level.
Oh yeah, just like close your eyes. And I do it to her sometimes too. I'm like, I'm ignoring you. I'll close my eyes. And we're the same person. So it's really bad. But yeah, she's the sassiest little thing. I like to tell people she's a firecracker. Like there's that loud pop where it's like, ah, but then there's like this beauty in the sky. Like she's just that. She's a loud pop. You always know she's around, but she's super, super fierce and beautiful.
Oh, I love it so much. It's so, and I always laugh at your Zoe stories, and really just all of your stories. That's something that I think makes your podcast really fun, is that you're, I don't know, you're very animated, and you're a good storyteller, and you always have something fun and funny to say.
Thanks.
So I think that, your story, your adoption story, and just your family's choice to say yes to hard things probably had a lot to do with you deciding to do a podcast and just share more of yourself and your family and your personality. And so what added to that story? What was attachment like? What was it like in those first few years? What did your boys think? What are some of those harder things that affected your story?
Yeah, that's so good. I was really worried about how attachment would look with her. Mostly because she came home and we loved her so deeply. Like there was no question about it. And so she'll tell you, I came home, Dad and Zoe flew on an airplane. I came home and Mom cried a lot, like because I just broke down at the airport. And she'll tell you like there's a ton of people and I was sad. I think honestly our attachment process was so awesome and so fast because we gave her language. She was 4, almost 5, and had nothing. If she wanted something or to communicate with you, she dragged you or she screamed. And so, or she pointed or she mimicked, so like we really sat down and gave her words. Even I remember telling people when they'd be like, how can we pray for you guys? I'm like, just pray that it clicks with her that she's supposed to use her hands to speak. Like I just need her little brain to realize that this is how she's going to talk from now on. And so with that, there is some times where she's like, I'm not deaf, I'm hearing. And I'm like, well, no, you're still deaf. Like, always deaf. God made you deaf.
Incorrect.
Like, yeah. I am hearing now. I'm like, well, you can't hear, so you're not hearing. So we gave her, like, and I don't mean like we were this great savior of people, but like we just offered her this thing that we had for her. Much like we offered her a family, we offered her love, we offered her just one other thing, stability, and then on top of that, here, this is how you're going to communicate. So attachment was really quick. The first 6 months, I can tell you totally honestly, I don't remember. Like I could go back and be like, oh yeah, a few things happened, but like she came home, the boys started school, and so she came home, we had the meet the teacher day 2 days later. So we like broke rules where it's like cocoon and stay home and don't go anywhere. And we're like, we have to go meet the teachers now. So we took her in to meet the teacher. That was kind of a nightmare. And then I had to walk the boys into school for some reason the first day of school, which means I had Zoe on my hip, which means I left her brothers for the first time without her being able to understand. Which means I walked out of the school. She was screaming and biting and pulling my hair, and I'm smiling because I'm sweating profusely. And it was one of the first times that I was like, somebody's going to think I'm kidnapping this kid.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh.
This person doesn't look like me. And she's screaming and clawing the walls. Luckily, our principal at the time has adopted grandkids from Haiti. And so she was like, here, what can I help you with? Like, she really ushered me out in a great way. But yeah, so I think just the understanding of time and language, and then understanding her, we cocooned as best as we could. But when I saw how well she did outside of our home, how some kids look for other people to connect to, I can't remember what that's called, but when they like go sit on other people's lap or take food from other people and like try to force that bonding with other people, she wasn't shopping like that. Yeah, totally. We would go to church and she would run away from us and always come back home. Like she would always come check in with us. And once I realized that that was the case, I was like, oh, we're not cocooning anymore. Because I was getting depressed cocooning. She was not doing well cocooning. And when I realized like she needed people just as much as I did, I was like, oh, we're done with this.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need a cocoon anymore.
You know, okay, I have so many thoughts. So first of all, I think it's really the concept, because we've talked about this before. We're both extroverts, and I've thought about cocooning, and I'm like, I would go insane. Like not being able to share my life with anyone else, or like what I'm going through, I would go crazy. But I think it is so interesting that your daughter is deaf and is also an extrovert. Because you would think that those two things wouldn't go together. Like naturally, you would just have to be a little bit more introverted. But I think it's such a fascinating concept.
Yeah, she has such a dynamic personality. She makes friends everywhere we go. It makes Jessie and I so uncomfortable. Not for her, but for the people that she's like, come here. Like at the pool is the perfect example. She'll meet little girls at the pool and she'll have them cartwheeling into the pool and performing into the pool. All of this stuff. And I'm like... these poor girls probably don't even want to be with her. So I'm always like, hey, Zoe, come over here. And they're like, oh, where's Zoe going now? And so like she leads so well, just naturally, which is really funny. Yeah, you would think her deafness would like hinder her, but she's like, it only makes her shine a little bit more.
That is so cool. But yeah, I think that we've explained it on the podcast before, but just really quick, can you give us a recap for those who don't know or who are maybe tuning in for the first time? What is cocooning?
Oh, that's a great. So cocooning is where adoption experts, I should say that you should spend time at home in your home with your family for X amount of time. I think people go as far as to say like 6 months.
I was about to say, I think it's 6 months.
I can't, like, makes me want to like throw up a little bit. So it's where you are at home with your people. You are the only one to give food to the child. You are the only one to meet the child's needs and to really be the sole caregiver, which makes sense because you may have missed out. I mean, like we missed out on 5 years of being Zoe's sole caregiver, but it's supposed to be this bonding time where you meet every need, which,
right.
Can we just say like that sounds exhausting? And
I bet it is. But for these kids, I mean, it makes sense for so many of them because they've had caregivers in and out and they don't understand that you're different from that. And
Yeah.
so I get it, but it does sound exhausting. And isn't there's like an integration process where like first you bring grandparents in and then you bring close
Yep.
friends in, but like into your world and then venture
Yep.
out. So that's why your story, you know, and I just want to highlight these things for anyone who doesn't know or doesn't understand why your child was pulling your hair and clawing and biting you as you're walking out of the school. But she just saw you leave your kids somewhere,
Yes.
and
Yep.
she has no concept that that's not like your next stop is not for her.
Yeah. Well, and she doesn't understand that we're going to have them back in 6 hours. One of the things she probably saw the most was kids leaving her orphanage and never coming back. Which is a great thing because that means they're being adopted. And she was from a smaller orphanage. And I will say I have great relationships with two of the other moms that have adopted from our orphanage, and both of those kids attached really well. So I think that means they were really well loved and cared for by their orphanage mamas, because I think if 3 kids come home and do all right, something is happening correctly at that orphanage.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it was. If there was one super huge mistake I made, it was Jesse being at work. I'll blame him. Jesse being at work that day and then having to go into the school to drop them off. I mean, probably dropping them off in general. I probably should have just had somebody else drop them off, but hindsight.
Yeah. So talk to me about your boys. So they know ASL as well, right?
They do. So Zeke and Titus, yeah, they sign. Zeke said the other day, man, I need to be a little bit better at signing everything for her. So Zeke and Zoe are a little bit more bonded than Titus and Zoe, but I think that's because Titus is our natural baby. And I have, so I'll finish that thought in a second, but they're really sweet with her. Every once in a while, Titus and Zoe will get in a huge fight, and I'll be like, oh, well, we better just send her back to Africa. And he's like, that's so mean. Why would you say that? And I'm like, I'm just obviously kidding. But somebody asked me the other day, like, how they are. And I was like, they are siblings through and through. Like, she loves them so much and they love her so much. And our oldest, Zeke, has been doing a lot of reading on the civil rights movement, which 12 I feel like is a little extreme. But I could like just cry for it, because he is so compassionate and he is so concerned with why people would treat people of other colors or differences differently than this little white boy that he is. And so he, in school last year, was when they started reading about all of it. And he was like, I have seen my sister be treated differently. 1, because she's black. 2, because she's deaf and people don't think she can hear what they're saying. He's like, but I do. And he's like, so I'm learning how to stand up for her in a different way. So it's this precious thing that he's learning, this compassion. And like, I've let him read probably bigger books than I should, but he understands and he has a heart for this community that I think wrecks my world. And I remember praying, like, there was nights I would lay in bed during our adoption process just knowing that adopting a child from a hard place was going to wreck our boys. Mm-hmm. They were going to be different. Their faith was going to be different. Their family was going to be different. Like, their mom and dad would be different after this. And the Lord just whispered so clearly to me every time, let me wreck them. And I was like, oh, all right. Like, they're going to be wrecked and it's going to be for the better. And so the cool part now is, like, if I ask them, like, well, if and when you get married, like, do you want to adopt? And they're like, yes, we will adopt. I'm like, well, that's so neat. So it's really cool. And then, I forgot what story I was going to go back to. Darn it.
Hey, you know what? That's okay. While you're thinking about it, let me ask you a little bit more of a surface level question, but I always am so curious. What's the hair situation? Did you have to do like some research there, or do you go to the beauty shop for like 8 hours? I mean, I hear different moms do different things.
Oh yeah. Okay. So we did everything. At first I would like comb her hair in the bathtub because she had shaved her head, like her head was shaved. And I was like, I don't know why moms are complaining. This is so easy to comb out. And then it grew. And so we actually met this really sweet woman early on. Her name is Miss Angelina, and she was from the Congo. And so that was such a cool connection. She would come over every 6 weeks and braid Zoe's hair. Like she would braid box braids, basically. Like she'd braid hair into her hair, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So we did that for a while, but it's still like when I have to take the braids out, it's a 6-hour day to take the braids out, and then it's a 6-hour day to comb the braids out or comb her hair out and detangle. And then I had a friend. I thought one day I did a really cute little twist style on her, and I sent her to school, and I got a text from her teacher, and it said, "Hey, Miss King is gonna fix her hair for you." I'm like, "Oh man,
What?
I thought I did a good job." And so Miss King is African American, and I was like, "Okay, fine." So she sent me a video like, "Hey, if you're gonna twist, this is how to twist." I'm like, "Oh, oopsies." And so then she said, "Hey, would you let me?" Her daughter's the same age as Zoe. How about Zoe comes to spend a night at my house, and I will braid her hair while she's there. I'm like, "Have a good night." Like, see you later. And so she took Zoe she took her twice, I think, and had her spend the night and do her hair. And then sweet Miss King says to me one day, "You know what I would do if I were you?" And I just looked her dead in the eyes. I was like, "If you were white?" And she's like, "Yeah." Like, "What?" And she's like, "I would get sister locks for her." And she had just had her hair sister locked. So she's like, "This is what you need to do for Zoe." So sister lock is like this micro dread, basically. Like it's a micro lock. And it's super expensive to start. But it's Zoe's natural hair. It grows pretty quickly. She goes in every 8 weeks for a touch-up or a retighten. So they basically like take, like if we were going to get our roots done, they just go in and they take that little bit that's grown out and they retighten it or like tighten it. And then like we're almost at a year with these locks, and she can swim without a swim cap on. She shampoos it with Suave shampoo, of all things. That's great for her hair, is Suave.
Huh.
And it is like my dream come true. And for a while we're like, "No, we don't want to do it. It's too expensive." All that stuff. And I was combing her hair out one day, and she was crying because it's not fun to get your hair combed out. And Jesse looked at me and he goes, "Could you stop hurting her?" And I was like, "Oh, here's the coconut oil. Here's the water. Here's the comb. Have at it."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, like you're really hurting her." And I'm like, "There's no way to get around detangling hair without hurting a child. Like it's just how it is." And so he was like, "Let's look into this." And so it has been such a great thing. And we get to go to the salon every 8 weeks. We've made awesome friends there. Zoe knows that in that chair, she gets whatever she wants. It's only a 2-hour appointment now, 2.5 hours.
That's not bad.
So no, but to get them done was 26 hours. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Did you just go like 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row?
We just went for 2 days. Like we got there like 7:00 in the morning Saturday, left at like 7 or 8 that night, went back 7:00 Sunday morning. That night we left at like 11. It was so long.
Did you read several books or?
We watched, so they have a movie TV in there, and we watched so many movies. And Zoe, like I said, like she knows when she's in that chair, she gets whatever she wants, because that 26 hours set her up for whatever.
Yeah.
Like, "I want the iPad. Here's the iPad, baby. What else would you like? Gummies? Do you want gum? Do you want candy? Do you want pizza? I don't care. You can have whatever you want. Like, just sit here." And I'm like, "Soda? What? Oh, here you go." And so, yeah, but it is the best. Like her hair now, even right after we got it done, I was like, "Oh yeah, we'll never go back." And so since it's locked, like, she'll be able to grow it out forever. And if she ever wants it done, like if she's ever done with it, she can shave it and not have locks anymore. But I will punch her.
So much time.
So much time, so much money over the years. So it's great. But like she can grow it out, and like in a couple of years, like if she wanted it to like have a different hairstyle, like she could cut it into a different hairstyle. It's great. That's
so cool. I always like to ask those things, because my kids, my adopted kids are both white, and so I don't really have any cultural differences per se. So I always want to ask those questions, because I know that lots of listeners do. And yeah, it's interesting. So my sister-in-law is actually from Cameroon, and I have another friend who has a daughter who's African American, and she went over and helped her with her hair one day. Oh. My sister-in-law did. And so I love making those connections. It's really fun.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your Miss King was good for you too.
Oh, Miss King is precious. Another great thing about these sister locks, y'all, is like you don't use any product. So like as a mom with an African daughter, I would like stand in the beauty product section and be like, well, we're out of this, so maybe I should try this, or I'll try this, or I'll try this. And so it was really fun when she was having them done. I was like, go in your bathroom. We're throwing all of this away. All she does to do her hair is like spray a little bit of water, and now she gets to use Suave, which, God bless America. She has the most expensive hair regimen ever, and now I'm like, here's your Suave.
Yeah.
99 cents.
99 cents. Oh my gosh. I love it. Your family seems so fun. Let's move on and talk a little bit about your podcast, because I know you share a lot about your family in your podcast while also exploring other people's families and their lives. So I know you kind of mentioned like the general feel of your podcast, but why did you want to start it, and what audience do you serve now?
I think I wanted to start it because I was longing for a way to help other women. I remember like early stages of motherhood was really lonely. And even now there's like really lonely seasons. Mm-hmm. And while we're so plugged into social media and everything else, we're still a really lonely people group. That sounds like a funny way to say it, but we're lonely and we're superficial. And so when I looked at my strengths, my husband gets so frustrated with me because I will just talk to anybody. I will make friends at the grocery store. I worked at a coffee shop for a while, and I invited complete strangers over to my house for dinner. So he was like, who's coming over? I'm like, oh, well, they drink like a breve. And she's like, what are their names? I'm like, yeah, we're going to have to find that out. He's like, oh my gosh, please don't do that. So it was just a matter of like, I really love making friends, and I felt like it was something I'm pretty good at. And so I was like, why can't I use this gift that I really do feel like the Lord's given me to just be a little friend that people can like plug in their ears, like once a week, or binge it if you want, like be connected with somebody, and with somebody who's going to fill you up, and with somebody that's going to encourage you.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of like birthed out of that. And then, nobody wants to just hear me talking all the time. So
my favorite you're pretty funny.
Yeah. I'll run out of stories real quick. My favorite thing to do is like have coffee with my friends. And so I thought, gosh, like I should do, I feel like I'm like making this sound like I've never heard a podcast that interviews. A lot of people interview people. And when I was listening to like the Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey, I was like, I could do that. Like I could talk to people for a living. That sounds like so much fun. And so I was like, yeah, I could totally do that. And so it was like, well, what do you love to do? I love to make friends. Okay, why do you want to do that? To make people less lonely. Okay, well, how do you do that? I can sit and introduce two friends, and it gives me no greater joy to be like I cannot wait to introduce you, Alex, to my friend Juliana, because y'all are going to get along so well. And sometimes there's only the common denominator of knowing the person who introduced you.
Yeah.
But isn't that such a cool thing when like the introducer can like sit back and be like, you two love me and I love you, and you're going to make good friends because there's so much more in common here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where it came from, where I was like, if I can just sit and have a conversation with a friend, whether it's a new friend, an old friend, or whatever, but we can talk and somebody can gain something from those conversations. And somebody can be a little less lonely in them too. So then my hope for it, obviously, is to win awards. I'm totally kidding. Are there podcasting awards? I don't even know.
I think there are. We should like audition, or how do you get in? Like we could nominate each other.
Yes, I'll do it. Okay. It's a deal.
Okay. So I'm loving this. I'm like, you guys can't see me, but I'm sitting here just beaming, because even though your podcast doesn't cater to just adoptive moms or the adoptive community in general, like mine does, we totally have the same mission. And I think that that's something that's the reason I started my podcast, is I knew how lonely I was in our circumstances. And I was like, is everyone just this miserable and nobody talks about it? And I was the same way. I was like, no, we're not doing that anymore. Like, I'm going to be the one that's honest and can stand up and say, hey, this really sucks. And there's not even an upside right now. Like, it's just all sucks. And share the wins too. And so I love that. I love that you are saying, hey, this doesn't have to keep going. We don't have to just be miserable. We don't have to just isolate ourselves, especially with our culture now, with, where everything can be superficial and no one would ever know the difference. And you are saying, no, that's not how we're going to do this.
Yeah. Well, because like even just last night, I reached out to an internet friend and I was like, hey, something's wrong. I can't figure out my website. Like, something's not connecting here. Something's not doing this. And she was like, we like FaceTimed and she's like, okay, let me Google this. I'm like, I shouldn't be able to Google something. But like, there's something so great about community. And I feel like that's what the Lord's really teaching me in this season, where it's really easy for me, especially growing a podcast, where I can sit in my office and I can work, and be totally content with that, knowing that I'm doing something I love. But then I like get up and I'm like, oh, I miss my friends. Like, oh my gosh, like a whole day went by and I didn't get a text from anybody and I didn't text anybody. Like, how can I be saying like, let's be all about friendship if I'm not willing to be a friend? And so it has taken a lot for me to friend new people online, or to reach out to help, saying like, something's wrong and I can't figure it out. Or like, even after I texted that one girl, I had to text another girl where I'm like, I need your help. This is really hard for me. And so it's just a matter of, we're not going to sit down and be silent and be lonely. Like, that's not healthy. And I think that's something like the enemy wants for us. Mm-hmm. Because in our loneliness, that's where all of our shame and all of our guilt and everything kind of come to play. Because I can tell you, if I don't tell anybody like how poorly I treated my kids that day, then that shame will eat at me. But if I have a friend that I can go to, which I do in year one, where I'm like, oh, sorry, I just blew up with my children, like, oopsies, and like confess that to you, which I have, it just sits and festers, and that's not healthy.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't know. It makes me so happy to see other moms doing this who don't want to live like that anymore. And, honestly, that quote dignity of just keeping it all in and maintaining a good, good look to our family and whatever else, that doesn't breed good moms at all. Mm-hmm. And that's on this podcast, that's my whole mission, is just saying like, hey, we can't be there for our kids if we haven't healed from our own trauma and we haven't opened up about it and been honest about it. And on your podcast, you do that with guests every single week, and you kind of pull the truth out, not pull the truth out of them like they're refusing, but you're like, hey, this is safe. This is, other people need to hear your story. They need to hear your honesty. They need to hear your life.
Yeah, that means a lot that you say that, because there was a friend and mentor of mine that listened early on, and she's like, hey, if you stay surface, you're not doing yourself justice, or you're not doing your work justice. And I was like, oh. I'm like, well, how do I ask hard questions? And she's like, she gave me the best advice. If they wrote about it, you can ask them about it. It's like, oh, okay.
Oh, like, I'm just nosy.
Solid advice. Yeah, well, there's times where I totally am, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I shouldn't have asked you that. But then I'm like, well, we're just, like, my goal is that it feels and it sounds like, and it is, two friends having coffee. Mm-hmm. And that's not, like, me tiptoeing around your, like, kids. Like, that's not real friendship. So that's like saying, hey, did you lose your temper today? I did. like, it's just real life. And I think while authenticity is like a real buzzword lately, I was talking to another friend, and she said the same thing. Like, we all want this like authentic like brand and everything. She's like, but there's also a thing like fake authenticity. And so we have to be really mindful about being fake in our authenticity and being really genuine in it too.
That's such an interesting concept, because it's like sharing the hard stuff that only you want to share,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like I could continue talking to you for a long time, and I'm so glad that you and I have like another side project going on. And you know what? By the time that we will launch this, it will it will be out. So
Ooh.
yeah, we get to record really fun episodes that's just two adoptive moms talking about, I mean, it's not dumb. It's actually very important.
It is. Well, because we, like, even our last conversation, like, we actually should start recording our Marco Polos. But, because those get really deep. Really solid theology, too.
They do, actually.
Yeah, no, that for real. And so I think it's the lightheartedness of friendship. I mean, we bonded over being adoptive moms, but we have so much more in common.
So much fun. And so, yeah, I love talking to you. Are you ready for some of these closing questions?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you wish that someone had grabbed you by the shoulders, looked you in the eye, and told you before you started this adoption journey? Yeah, adoption journey.
Prepare for the worst. Hope for the best.
That's good. I think that's really good advice. I wish that someone had told me that too, because I really wanted to have those rose-colored glasses on.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to be like, it's going to be so awesome. And I didn't, even when I thought about the hard times, I still wanted to paint a pretty picture over it. Like, oh, but but I love adoption, so it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Okay, so what is something you wish you had done differently, aside from having your husband there the first day of school?
I think, like I said, the first 6 months are a total blur. One thing that's not a blur was every bedtime. Bedtime was so hard and so dark and so isolating when it comes down to it. Like, nobody else could do bedtime but me. And so that meant me laying in bed in the dark a lot with her, and it was really hard. And she's like a fidgeter, and she's like a mouth noiser. Like, she makes a ton of mouth noises when she falls asleep. Oh my gosh. And nothing sets me off faster than that, like this wiggling. And now I've come to realize I think she has restless leg syndrome. And I'm like a terrible mom, because I would like spank her bottom, like, stop moving. And so I think if I could go back and do anything differently, I would make a point to go into every bedtime with worship music on.
Ooh.
Even in my earbuds, because she can't hear it, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I would have just put earbuds in, so I can't hear her weird mouth noises. I think that's the one thing I would do differently.
Yeah. I'm loving your answers because they're different. They're really unique. But that reminds me, so sometimes when my kids are freaking out, like the witching hours, like your husband's like, I'll be home in 10, and then 20 minutes later you're like, I'm about to cut you, get here. And it's like in those moments that I just start singing worship songs really loudly. I think that's when my kids are like, okay, we need to back off.
She's losing it.
I'm like, take me deeper.
Yeah, I wanted to sing, shout to the Lord, all the earth. Your hands are just up in the air like, oh. That's how I envision it. Please send me a video of this.
I will. One time Brian came home and I had I've had Prince of Peace just on repeat on Alexa, and he was like, so it's been that kind of day, huh?
Alexa, how many times have you played this song?
But he didn't even have to say anything. He's like, so it's been that bad, huh?
That's
like, yes, take them away. What is your favorite way that your tribe supported you through your adoption story?
So I always say, like, my best friend Juliana forced us out of the house. There were so many times that I would say, like, she'd be like, hey, come here and do this. I'm like, I don't know. It's a little hard, with Zoe. And so she really, like, was like, no, don't be that way. Like, I'm like, well, she's deaf. She doesn't want to go to the concert. And she's like, she will love the concert. Come on. Or, like, she'll love the lights. Like, come out. So she, like, and that was after the cocooning process, obviously. But she, really pulled us out of a funk, I think. Like, it could have been a pretty deep funk, but she didn't allow it to happen.
That's a good friend right there. Like the one who can
the best.
Be there and understand, but also pull you out of your comfort zone.
But she said, so there's this phenomenal book out right now, written by an adoptive mom, but it's a fiction novel. Or it's a novel. I don't know. It's called No One Ever Asked. It is one of the best books in the world. I think everybody should read it. It's by Katie Ganshert. Her daughter's adopted from Congo. She's actually a guest on my podcast on, like, episode I don't know, 7. But in the book, she talked like there's an adoptive mom character, and her dialogue that runs through her head is phenomenal. So good. And so Juliana read that book, and she was like, there was so much, because I had told her, like, this girl nailed it. Like, I have thought these things. When you read it, you're going to know. And so she was like, I had no idea. I didn't think about so many of these things. And I was like, yeah, there's so much in there that is just, if you're not in it, you don't know it.
I mean, I'll say it again. That's a good friend. Like that, she's going to read a book for you. That's awesome. That's so cool.
She's the best.
So on the flip side of that, what is a way that you were hurt or misunderstood by your people?
I think they had the best of intentions in like dropping food off, but it's really easy to do that, like drop food at the door and run. So we had some people who were awesome and who came in with bags of groceries, and who would come in and stay and sit and eat with us. But then we had people who dropped food at the door and just bolted.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a hard time, because it was like, oh, we totally, like, we weren't those people who needed food dropped off. Zoe was doing so well, so fast. And so we were like, oh, you left us. Oh, like, we just wanted community so bad.
Yeah.
And you can't, like, chase somebody down fast enough.
But on that note, okay, I have to say this to anyone listening, because I get a lot of support system members who listen to the podcast too. But if you're an adoptive mom, and I'm preaching myself, but be honest about what you need, because there are people like Jeanette and I or Jeanette and me, I guess that would be more grammatically correct. But we like want to talk to people. We need that. We crave it. We're like, please don't leave me.
Even if it was just 5 minutes of coming in and being like, hey, we love you. Me being like, oh, phew, we're not forgotten. I feel like that's right. While they were bringing us food, I still felt like I was removed from all my social circles, that I felt forgotten.
Yeah. But then there are adoptive moms, or just people in general, who are like, okay, thanks, bye. You know, like they
don't come in, don't offer food, like just leave it at the door. Yeah.
So as an adopted mom, be honest, like tell people what you need as far as community goes, because we definitely had those people that were like, do you want us to like stay and eat with you? And they were shocked when I was like, yes, please. But and then on the flip side, as a support system, ask those questions. Be like, hey, do you need people right now, or do you need alone time right now? And don't just assume, because sometimes people want you to stay and eat with them.
Well, I think even a point person to say like, hey, today was a really rough day for them, just drop food and go.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, today was a great day. Like they would love for you to come in and see Zoe and stuff like that. There was, also, we did so many things wrong, but like one of my favorite things was, we had like a baby shower for Zoe.
Oh, that's so cool.
After she came home. Cause we didn't have a girl, like we didn't know anything. And so people still say, and it's just the most precious thing. She was sitting on somebody's fireplace fireplace, not mantle. Mantle's on top, right?
The hearth, right? Isn't that what it's called? The hearth?
She's sitting by the fireplace with present. And she would open a present and she would hold it up against her, eyes and mouth wide open, hold it up. Oh my gosh. And then whoever it was from, I would say, oh, it's from them, and point to them, and she would run over and hug, and she was always the most gracious little thing. It was so precious.
She's pretty cute.
She's not like that anymore. She's so American. Lost it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can imagine that would happen, but that's really cute. So, okay, if you were to sum it all up, what's your biggest piece of advice or encouragement for adoptive families?
So is this for people who have adopted or wanting to adopt?
Girl, answerer's choice.
Gosh. Okay. So if you're wanting to adopt, engage your community. Don't do it alone. You will need support the entire time. And I think it's the same for the other side. Like, engage your community. Like, and if you don't have one, find one. There's so many great adoptive communities that are out there, like within churches or even like counseling centers know of other adoptive families. Like, because believe it or not, you need counseling after you adopt.
Yeah.
So much. And so I think engage your community for both of those. I think we are lost if we try to do this alone. And there's so many times where I have to kind of sift through, like, is this an adoptive issue? Is this a 7-year-old little girl issue? Is this an issue just because you're a sassy little girl? Is this an issue that came from your abandonment? Like, I have to, like, sift through these things. And luckily I have a friend who has a little girl adopted the same age as Zoe. So I can go to her and be like, okay, what am I looking at? What am I dealing with? So I think engage your community honestly.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think it's, there's so many layers to that, because you can just say engage your community, and that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And I think all of them are correct, you know?
Yeah.
All of them combined probably are correct.
Yeah, I think though. I just can't imagine doing it alone. Like, I think to do it alone is where so many fail and so many hurt. Like, I just can't imagine.
Or just trying to do it alone and trying to push down the feelings that you have. I think that I love that advice as well, just to admit how you feel, because it's not wrong to feel that way. It's wrong to push it down and pretend it doesn't exist. But yeah. Okay. As much as this is what I would say, I keep saying throughout the entire interview, I could just keep on talking to you, but I mean, people out there need to see cute pictures of your kids. So we need to find out where we can find those.
I am on Instagram too much of my day. So it's at Jeanette Tapley. Or you can check out my website, which has like blogs and show notes mostly for my podcast, but also family photos there, which is JeanetteTapley.com. And then on Facebook, I know, on Facebook I'm the Jeanette Tapley, but that seems meh. And it's mostly just stuff from Instagram, so you're better off at Instagram. If I'm being honest.
And your podcast is called
It's Time for Coffee.
Yay. And I love your like little catchphrase.
Oh, grab a cup, fill it up with whatever you want, and let's dive in.
I love it. And so, yeah, you guys should definitely check out her episode. I did an episode for her podcast as well, and it's just been so fun collaborating with Jeanette. And she always has such wise words. So definitely check out her podcast, and you can find that on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or on our website, JeanetteTapley.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Adoptive Mom Podcast. I know this stuff is hard, and I hope you found encouragement here. Remember, you are enough, and you're doing a great job. God wants to be at the center of this journey, and He is big enough to redeem all of our mistakes. Don't forget to check out show notes and other resources at theadoptivemompodcast.com. Thanks again for listening.